Hi there, and welcome to episode 167 of the ADHD Adults podcast. I'm James Brown, the man who has just had an epiphany that the intro jokes aren't going to work this week. And I'm joined, as usual, by Dr. Alex Connor, who is epicurious, or at least epiflexible. And of course, we're joined by Mrs. AuDHD, who is usually at the epicenter of anything chaotic. Alex, hi.
Epigenetics? Is that one? Have I done one?
That's really clever, Alex. Well done.
I'm not still doing that. I like it though. Is that?
Sorry.
That should be a new thing.
That could be a new bit, yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Well, can you replace the hello? Anyway, how are you both, Mrs. AuDHD first?
I'm really, really hot. How are you?
Nope.
No.
And the other one, him.
I'm excellent, thank you both.
Yeah.
Very nice to be here. It's exciting. What I like is that people seem to have wildly ignored our 3-month break and are still listening despite the existence of actual ADHD podcasts out there with what appears to be astrology-led rather than fact-based information. All ADHD people like cheese. And it's incredible. It's incredible. They're not good. Well, I mean, this isn't good, but they're actually
No, exactly.
not. They might be produced well, but wow.
Have you listened to any of them?
What the fuck do you think? No,
Well,
I've
then
seen,
how could you possibly judge?
because I've seen the 30-second snippets on the social medias, and they are wildly inappropriate and wrong.
Oh,
Wild.
that sounds just like my sort of podcast.
Yeah, really short. One of whom sent us a letter.
What?
Can I read it out?
Yes, please do.
Thank you very much. They're getting really less and less appropriate. It's from a Robert from Kidderminster, actually, says here.
Oh, wow.
It says, I somehow from heaven listened to your episode on environmental triggers. And did you know that James is very obsessed with the environment and recycling? He recently recycled 5 Stuart Lee jokes into 28 less funny Stuart Lee jokes on this script, which I really like. Thank you, Robert. He did. You're right. He's a shit, unfunny Stuart Lee, and he knows it.
I'm laughing because it's true.
It's factual. We've had a real letter. Can I read it out?
Yes, please do.
I order. It's from an Adam. It says, hi. Firstly,
Hi, Adam.
thank you for the podcast. Yeah, hi, Adam. Despite, bit rude, despite its chaotic, unprofessional nature with a lack of continuity, which is actually my favourite bits, it's brilliant. The blend of educational and entertaining elements with so much incredible vulnerability from you all has helped me understand myself and also supported my efforts in accepting my neurodiversity. I have, like I imagine many listeners, been on a bit of a journey with my arsehole of a brain. Sorry, I mean uncovering my neurological differences. My brain is an arsehole. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was young, and this was attributed to a lot of my challenges, oblique issues growing up. This year, at the age of 40, I was diagnosed with ADHD. You know how I hate rabbit ears, James? Do you hate oblique
honestly,
more?
I have walked off this podcast before, and I will walk off it again because it's not
Because
the
of
fact that
oblique.
you use the word oblique in someone's letter. It's the fucking glee you made, knowing the effect it would have on me.
I do. I really, really do. This year, at the age of 40, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and while I'm fully aware I am ADHD AF in many ways, there were things that felt a bit off until I heard Mrs. ADHD, I mean, dead naming you, but still, talk about autism and ADHD together, aka AuDHD, and more wonky cogs clicked into place. Ding. I haven't yet seeked a diagnosis for autism. To be honest, it was effort enough to get the ADHD one. I was hoping you could do an episode on AuDHD. There seems to be limited info, and most seems anecdotal. I only seem to present some ASD traits to the point I've wondered if this is just part of my ADHD, or if I'm actually just a twat and a fraud, which could also be the case, or if I'm masking hugely or completely unaware I am doing things. Anyway, sorry for waffling on. Alex, please don't slaughter my grammar, oblique spelling,
Fucking twice, come on.
ellipsis, and then an extra full stop after the ellipsis to make 4 stops, etc. Full stop. Thanks again, Adam.
Oh, I wish I could
Thanks,
talk
Adam.
to Adam.
Yeah, really,
I'm
really,
sure,
really nice.
I'm sure you can, and I think, Adam, we will do an episode on AuDHD, and I challenge Mrs. AuDHD to write it because we've talked about you doing it. We've talked about you doing a script, so
That
I
would be
challenge you to write the
perfect.
script.
It would. I mean,
Yay!
the idea of it, not the script.
Give
just
me
to
a
be
few
clear.
years. No, I'm going to write the script.
No, I
Yeah,
meant
exactly.
like perfect.
What? What?
Just being horrible to you. It's
Oh,
all
are
like
you?
this. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, as usual, this tricky anal fissure that just weeps and weeps and weeps for months and nothing you can do about it of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. Last time we talked about what we know about the environmental insert adjective.
Not
No.
much.
Verb. No. What's the word? What's the word, Alex? I don't know.
It's a preposition.
Preposition. Insert preposition. I sounded like Paul Calf then. You've got shit shoes on, you shitty shoed bastard.
I can't get over Weeping
Triggers.
Anal Fissure, which I went to see at Glastonbury in '93.
Oh.
Top band did some good EPs. Anyway, we talked about the environmental shit that could possibly be associated with ADHD. And to finish off our triple fister with possibly, I'd say, the second most painful of those fists, because it's not as difficult as the environmental stuff. We're going to talk about epigenetics. Thanks to absolutely fucking nobody for suggesting this topic, because it's a bastard to explain without getting too sciencey. The 3 parts include the well end of evidence, Alex the Psycho. Just to explain, if anybody doesn't know, that's a Goldilocks and Chain reference for a middle-aged man who wants to look like Paul Weller. Education Monkey, talking about the evidence around the topic. In part 2, we'll give our personal reflections and tips. It just doesn't work for these 3, does it? We'll just waffle on, probably arguably, on epigenetics. And then we'll answer some questions in the final section, thoughts with Gabby Logan. So, Alex, honestly, it's not often I get excited about this bit, but I can't wait to see how you explain epigenetics in accessible terms, like your actual job as a science communicator.
Okay, right. In the first of this triple header, we talked about genetics. And we talked about the DNA of our genes in every cell are the blueprint to make a protein. So, for example, insulin gene gets the cells in our pancreas to make the protein insulin. It reads them, and the other parts of the body don't do that because they're not told to. To make the insulin protein, the insulin gene has to be what we call expressed. And that means the blueprint, the DNA, is read by the cell, and the gene is then translated into a protein that the cell also makes. You may also remember that DNA is essentially a great big curly-whirly molecule made up of 4 smaller molecules in lots of different groups called bases, which are A, T, C, and G.
Thank you for that basic reminder, but get to the point, because you're avoiding the difficult bits, aren't you, Al?
Just shush. Epigenetics is a relatively new field of biology, which genuinely, when I was studying genetics, may have accidentally gone absolute bollocks to, which then turned out to be partly true. Not the bollocks bit that it exists. Yeah. It explores that gene expression is regulated by things that do not involve actual changes to those 4 letters A, C, T, G, the gene sequence itself, or rather changing them from one letter to another. They do change a bit in a different way. And the term epigenetics, James, you might be interested to know, is from the Greek prefix epi, which is upon or over, James, epi, and genetics, which means genes in Greek. Actually, it means springs from, I think. These are the start. These epigenetic mechanisms are so upon or around the genes then. They're thought to be pivotal, in how we develop, how we grow, how we respond to environmental things, not just us, but our children ahead of us.
Right. So frustratingly and annoyingly, that wasn't bad.
Okay.
But I'm looking forward to you mangling the next bit.
Yes, right. DNA is those 4 letters, A, C, T, and G, but they can be regulated in different ways. Epigenetics involves regulating them primarily through 3 types of mechanism, 3 things. One of them is methylation, which means adding a carbon and 3 hydrogens to stuff. also modifying proteins called histones, and then a group of molecules which are like DNA but called RNA, and they specifically don't code for proteins. They're RNAs that don't code for proteins. We're going to cover the first two, the DNA methylation and the histones, because otherwise Sam's head might explode if she were listening if we get into microRNAs and gene silencing, which I do like though. Right, first one, DNA methylation, adding a methyl group to one of those ACTGs. It adds those to the DNA rather than changing DNA itself. And so let's say, for example, that you're a couple of rabbits growing up and suddenly exposed to times in your life of no food whatsoever, no grass available. And that starvation might cause your body to add methyl groups to your DNA. The methylation of DNA can change the way that gene, that blueprint is read by the body. It can stop it, for example, being expressed. That means that gene is stopped from being turned into the protein. Think of it, James, like a genetic cock block, something you know a lot about if you're struggling. That's methylation. The second one, histone modification. Our DNA everybody's is wrapped around these proteins called histones, so it can form a barrel shape, so we can get loads of DNA inside our teeny tiny little cells. It coils up, and so the histone acts a bit like a skeleton to help the DNA coil into our chromosomes. Those histone proteins themselves can be modified. They can have groups just like the same methyl group that was that we add to DNA, but other ones like acetylation, and other bits and bobs as well. Phosphorylation, that's a phosphate group. You don't need to. Ubiquitination, I like that one because it's called ubiquitinyl group because they're bloody everywhere. And these can regulate how much of that histone uncoils the DNA to allow it to be read by the cell. So if you can see what I'm saying, the reading of the DNA can be changed without the DNA itself changing its code. I guess it's like putting a great big squiggle inside a book, isn't it? You haven't changed the type on the book, but you've changed how easy it is to read. And this can affect gene expression. Oh, Jesus.
That could have been much worse. I'm disappointed. Does this happen kind of at once?
You know, when you went to those scientific conferences, James, if you'd have sat in the room like you'd been paid, instead of, just fucking off, you would know this. Actual fake professor. These modifications, these epigenetic modifications happen. They're not fixed. They're not static. They can happen due to various things like starvation, any environmental trigger, really. Lifestyle factors, diet, doing physical activity or not doing it, getting really stressed, Sam, exposure to toxins, James. and in fact, anyone brought up in the 80s, shoving a Shaw deodorant to stick up your bum, pretending you've lost it. Sam, these factors can alter your epigenetic profile, not that last one. And it can tinker with your genetic expression, but it doesn't pass on to your children forever, but it can pass on to one or two generations. It can potentially, maybe, influence your health and disease outcomes.
I can do the bit.
Yeah,
I can do the bit.
We have messed it up. You can do the thing.
So what about the thing, Alex? What about the thing?
Well, James, as you briefly and very, very clumsily, may I add, mentioned in the genetics episode, there are possibly 6 mechanisms where genetics might be involved in the onset of ADHD, Bab. I can't do any more. And one of those 6 might be probably a bit, possibly, epigenetics. It's a really early field. So if you're well into your epigenetics, good, keep going, because we think that this is going to have a thing in the future. We're being scientific about it, so we're being all circumspect. It's quite exciting, but it isn't yet proven. So
I was circumspected when I was about 18 months old.
Were you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Sam told her mum this before she met me, didn't you?
Really? How did she?
Yeah,
know?
that was
Not before I met you, no.
No, before you met her.
I
Before I
hadn't
met
met
her. Sorry. Yeah, you hadn't met me. Yeah. That was a side quest. Anyway, carry on now.
What a thing to add to in the middle of an unrelated podcast.
Shall I tell the whole story?
Yeah.
I think I've told it before.
Yeah, there's a monologue in there, I reckon. Right,
Yeah.
it is plausible that beginning in the womb, possibly even before that, this is the perinatal thing we talked about before, environmental exposures, which could be lots of things, could coact dynamically. That means changeably, really, I guess, with your genetic predisposition to ADHD over a while to shape or change your risk of actually developing your ADHD brain and profile in the future. And how that ADHD presents. Quite interesting then, because after me saying last week, I don't believe the environmental thing, what if the environmental thing is affecting the genetics? It definitely could be. Most of they're quite little because it's new. Research out there is on the DNA methylation, the first one. Mostly looking at the genes. I mean, this makes sense, right? Just look at the genes we already know to be involved or rather correlated with ADHD, like dopamine receptor mutations, and looking at how DNA methylation might change them. The very first epigenome is what they call it, wide association study, or the EWAS, which looked at the entire DNA of people measuring where methylation occurred. It did identify a change in methylation in new genes that were not previously associated with ADHD. But, and it's a big however, there are subsequent studies that have given mixed methods. I like that you like that because it's really lame, isn't it?
I like it.
Mixed results. So one suggested there were changes in ADHD with the methylation. One suggested that change was lost on further analysis. Some studies got disappointing results. First big EWAS meta-analysis on C3, entirely separate population-based adult cohorts. So like 5,000 people found different methylated positions in one cohort, but somebody grouped the data from these three together. That's a meta-analysis. And it failed to detect significant differences, which is really frustrating. And that's between ADHD and just not ADHD, and that's probably the most reliable of that information, but it's still small. The only prospective study assessing DNA methylation at birth and at age 7 years found 13 DNA locations where the level of DNA methylation might be predictive, and in this small study was significantly predictive of the trajectory of ADHD symptoms from being 7 up to 15 years of age. So some connection there. A big barrier to this being in any way the truth is the very problematic problem of what samples do you test? Epigenetic tests are usually performed on accessible tissues, blood, saliva, and in mine and James's case, organs. That last one was a lie. So it may not reflect those in the relatively inaccessible organ of interest, the brain box in this case, because demethylation, as you might expect, varies substantially between your different tissues. People often say the dopamine levels in the blood are high, therefore it affects your dopamine in your brain. Well, then that's not the same thing. And it's the same here. So if you see DNA methylation in your blood, it doesn't mean that those genes are methylated in your brain box. And it doesn't mean that even between different cells and regions of your brain. So are these studies even testing the right thing?
I used to do aging research as an aside, and I published a paper where we use blood to measure a biomarker of aging. And obviously, one of the criticisms was, aren't you just measuring the aging of blood cells and not the body? Which is very true, and it's a really good point. Well put, Alex. The little evil devil in me wants us to talk about generational trauma because it's a topic that lots of people talk about, and you did allude to this earlier. So whether epigenetics is a real and a biological mechanism for things that happened to your parents, your grandparents, etc., impacting you and your biology, you, Alex, specifically you.
It's a bit of a hospital pass, that one, isn't it? There's no way of me getting out of this without being A, boring, and 2, offensive to people for whom I don't. No, it's really good. And what I really like is that you know more about this subject than me, because I read this bit out, it's making it look bad. When I explained what epigenetics James was, he absolutely knows all that already. I feel I should have that and could read this explanation out. I don't want to say it. Right. Yes, epigenetic changes can pass from one generation to the next, not forever in our lineage. This is transgenerational epigenetic inheritance, and it does happen. So the babies of starving rabbits will have different temporary genetics to the babies of identical clone rabbits that weren't exposed to starvation environments. Interesting, but their DNA doesn't change in the long multi-generational term. The degree and duration of that epigenetic marker being sustained and inherited varies. In mammals, which is what James used to be pre-siring, there are two. Are vampire Draculas? Are they mammals?
No, we're a separate. We're a separate phylum.
Amazing. In mammals, the famous phylum, there are two major. I don't know whether I'm laughing at whether you're whether it's a phylum at all, or whether you should say for the singular. They're both making me happy. In mammals, there are two major epigenetic reprogramming events when those epigenetic markers get taken away from the DNA. The first is the formation of sperm and eggs, so it's the spermatogenesis, and the second during the early embryonic development. While the exact number of generations they persist for isn't, we don't know at all. It's probably and usually a massive reduction between 1 and 2. And that's because of those reprogramming events in the sperm and egg and embryo development. Some changes can persist for even 3-4 generations, but that's really much more common in the non-mammalian species like James, or in very specific contexts where those reprogramming mechanisms are less effective.
Yeah, I'd now like to point out, and I hold my hand up entirely for this bit. It now says, James, getting bored, bring us home, cowboy, ... And then
Which
Alex, nothing, because I forgot to finish.
ADHD is a genetic thing. It's a multi-generational genetic neurodevelopmental disorder. We could imagine that epigenetics is playing some role in why it's only 80% hereditary. It might be that your symptoms will be worse and a few people tick over into diagnosable through the exposures to the environmental toxins that we talked about in the double fister through epigenetic mechanisms. But equally, it's genetics. So transgenerational trauma could be a result of all of you lot having more ADHD traits than the general population. And at the moment, we simply don't know.
I think you papered over that horrendous error in script writing pretty well there. And on that note, we've lost Mrs. AuDHD.
I'll do it.
And hopefully she'll be back for part 2. So see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
No. Yes. Oh, I didn't know you were coming back.
Alex, hi.
Aight. What's up? Hello, Governor.
Welcome back to episode 167 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we are talking about the causes of ADHD 3, epigenetics. And this is the part where we talk about our personal reflections and give a tip, but we haven't got any. Bye.
Okay. That was good.
See you next time.
7 out of 10. Though. It was a solid 7 out of 10.
James, do you have any personal reflections?
Well, I can probably, yeah.
Okay.
Muster something up. I genuinely think it's a fascinating topic, and I think as we learn more in general about epigenetics, we will understand more about, as Alex said, that the missing gap between how much of ADHD is inherited and how much isn't. Because if it isn't a genetic mutation and developed by a typical passage of inheritance, it would be interesting to find that out. Epigenetics, in my opinion, from what I know, having worked in the field, is very much like the gut microbiome, which I think we covered in the nutrition episode. And that is that most of the studies that look at it are not interventional. In other words, something isn't tried to measure the impact of epigenetics on something. It's population based. So we'll measure the epigenetics of this population, we'll measure the epigenetics of that population, see if there's a difference. Or you'll take a population and measure the epigenetics and see if the profile can predict something. And that isn't a very clear way of finding out causality. So again, we're at this point where it's an interesting factor, but we don't have causality. Just like with the gut microbiome, we know it's different in different conditions, but there aren't many studies where it is changed to see what happens. When I think about particularly the intergenerational thing, now my dad, Robert, bless him, although he didn't really show it, must have had some trauma. He served in the Korean War. He lost his closest friends and was about 15 seconds away from joining them because he managed to get out of a trench before a mortar landed.
And growing up, my God.
Yeah, and grew up in extreme poverty. And we do know, for example, with epigenetics, that if people who grow up and go through, as Alex said, with rabbits, periods of extreme food deprivation, that can increase the risk of health conditions in their offspring. Not evidence for ADHD, but for metabolic health conditions, for example. But as much as I'm pretty sure Dad was inattentive type ADHD, I didn't know him as a child, as old as I am. So I don't know if he had any symptoms then. Now I've heard people say, I'm careful what I say here. I've heard people say that epigenetics is kind of the hot new cause of ADHD. It's the hot new theory, if you like, that this is what causes ADHD. And I don't buy that, largely because of the huge volume of genetic evidence, which shows, as we've said, that the vast majority of your risk of developing ADHD is genetic, and epigenetics may contribute to that or add to that slightly, but I don't think it's going to be a central cause. Where I think it may be more likely to impact us is after the earliest stages of development, and maybe after development as well. So it's possible actually that epigenetics could have an impact on our symptoms, because if you have a lifestyle that could lead to DNA methylation between those C's and the G's, they're called CPG islands. If you had a lifestyle and an environment that caused that methylation and that turned off the gene, for example, for a dopamine receptor or for a dopamine transporter or for a protein that's needed for typical brain function, then I think it's possible that that's where epigenetics could be having an impact. Not so much in the brain development, but certainly in terms of how the brain functions, because if you turn off those genes or turn them on, etc., then that is going to have an effect on brain function as well as development. Obviously, I haven't got a fucking tip. Ding. That's a cell phone, isn't it? So really I'm going to pass this on to whoever wants it, basically.
Since you're 18 months old.
Yes, exactly. Very good callback. I didn't pick that up at all.
Ding.
Sam.
Epigenetics, personal reflections.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously haven't really got any personal reflections. But yeah, similar to James, both. Where am I? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Yeah, both of my parents grew up in extreme poverty and lots of trauma. And, you know, my mum grew up in Belfast in the middle, in the heart of the Troubles. And yeah, so if it was a thing that could impact me, then that could be a cause. But it sounds like we don't know again. So it sounds pretty pointless. And again, even if I did know, what am I going to do with that information? It's not going to improve my life at all.
What about the really fascinating stuff that I just said? So, for example, your lifestyle having an impact on your function. So, if you look at the let's be honest, incredible Hulk-like metamorphosis you've been through in the last 2 years or 3 years since you started Pole, where you've gone from being this awful, wizened, weak woman into this, frankly, terrifying, muscular. I mean, it's not just your arms, it's your back. When the light, Alex, glints off her back, it almost looks like a close-up of a seashell. You can see the angles of muscles that don't exist in my body on her back. It's
like Conan the Barbarian.
Exactly. I mean, Arnie did not have the definition. Maybe
You know,
Sly
they, you
did,
know,
but
they made
Arnie
loads
didn't
of
have
toys
the
for that,
definition.
and they didn't know it was going to be an 18, and so they quickly invented He-Man, and that's how that happened.
Oh my
I did
God,
not
me
know
and James
that.
were He-Man and the Incredible Hulk at the weekend.
Really?
Yeah, he was
Your
He-Man and I
bedroom
was the
antics are
Incredible
not
Hulk.
relevant to this.
I fucking knew you were going there. Anyway, both of you,
Of course I would.
shut up,
Sorry.
shut up,
Go,
shut
go,
up,
go,
shut
go,
up,
go,
shut
go,
up.
go, go.
What could your reflection be on that? You have gone through a big lifestyle change. You've started resistance training. You've increased your strength. Now, generally, when it comes to lifestyle impactors and epigenetics, most of the studies point out that adaptive or healthy behaviors do alter epigenetic profiles. So it's possible, for good or for worse, that by living a healthier lifestyle, by exercising more and having more protein, for example, that might switch on or off some genes that are involved in brain function. So is that something that interests you? I mean, not that you've noticed differences in your symptoms, and because you're on medication, it's hard to pick that out. But that's the bit that interests me, that actually what we're doing now, not when the brain was developing, might have an impact on our symptoms.
See, I switched off when you were saying that because I was thinking, well, I can't have children, so that doesn't
Like a
apply to me.
methylated gene. Hey, genetics joke.
But you're saying that could impact me in my lifetime.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So let's say, for example, as an extreme example, there was a lifestyle factor that could switch off through epigenetics the insulin gene. You wouldn't create insulin protein. You would immediately become hyperglycemic.
Right.
So our health and the way in which our genes express themselves and are turned into proteins is regulated by our lifestyle. There's this interaction where the process of epigenetics can turn some genes on and turn some genes off.
Is that what? So I talked before about. So all my life I had, because I've always had like extreme anxiety, and linked with that I would have IBS and would just be bloated and sore and backed up all of the time. It was just awful. And then since going vegan and getting healthier, I don't have any of that anymore. But that's directly related, isn't it?
No, that's a brilliant example of something completely different.
But it is. Yeah. But there may have been an epigenetic effect of that on you. Remember, we have trillions of copies of the genes in every in our cells. So it would have to affect all of them. And this isn't a yes-no situation. So
right.
Can we affect enough of our genes? Yeah. No, that sounds boring. But you can do like 10% of them, couldn't you? There'd only be a few 100 billion.
Yeah, and
although I've got my muscles from my mum's family.
Really? I thought you were working out.
No. Well, yes, I am. But I'm just going to shut up now.
Can you guys hear the ice cream
man? Yeah. Have you not got your background suppression thing off?
I'll have 2 cigarettes and an E while he's there.
My mum asked for a poke because that's what they call them over in Belfast, and he told her to wait until all the children had gone, and she just went back to Dad really confused.
This is now turning, because we're in the pocket of big Mr. Whippy, into a discussion about ice cream. But in our Patreon body doubling the other day, we were talking about just having a job that's really simple. And I said, well, I used to be Mr. Whippy, and I'd love just to be back in that shack, say, 269s is it? Completely getting the fucking number of the product wrong and the job by the sound.
I used to make ice creams as well. It's not relevant.
It's not. Anyway, Alex, do you have any relevant reflections or tips?
Just one thing, really. I agree with what you said and what Sam said, really. I think that epigenetics is really exciting. It's fun. I think it's a relatively small effect on our ADHD profile as a population, mainly because we see it. ADHD isn't going away. And it would have by the second generation for the most part, because in mammals, that's what happens. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And also, all of those hundreds of gene associations we've seen with ADHD, they're in the ACTG things. Then that's what we're seeing. We're seeing differences in those codes, not for the most part in the epigenetics, which is a relatively small effect. What I will say as a tip, though, is assume epigenetics is real and keep yourself healthy for the next generation. If you don't have children, or if it isn't true,
but you said it isn't real.
Well, so no, I haven't. I just don't think it's a massive effect on ADHD. But even if it isn't, pretend it is. Keep yourself healthy. Do what Sam does, and then if you don't have kids, or it's just bollocks, your punishment for getting it wrong is a really healthy and long-lived lifestyle. if you've got any power at all out there, what I would ask is that we start to acknowledge and remove the barriers to accessing healthy lifestyles, food, and exercise for people with ADHD, because that's the problem we've got. And then much more important than whether it causes an epigenetic difference is let's get access to university education, to whatever exercise you want to do, those things. Like I said, let's get that sorted before we really over panic about a bit of DNA methylation. That's what I think.
Okay. I didn't like any of that, but some time passed, and we're now and we're now at the point of deciding on. We've already decided playing a game. So have we got time for a game?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have. So this week, Alex, what day is it today? I can't remember. 2 days
It's
ago,
Wednesday, I think.
it's Woden's Day. We talked about it, didn't we, Sam?
Woden's Day and
Woden's
Thursday.
Day. And
Yes,
Thursday.
Thursday.
and the one after,
I don't
Frigga, is
know.
it from
James
Freya?
only told me to.
it's Frigga's tag. Frigga was the wife of Woden and Thor's mother.
Oh.
We're in the pocket of
love
ancient
this.
Norse mythology.
Yeah, so do I.
I
Oh,
love
we're right
all
in my
that sort of
manner.
thing.
Can we get? Listen, can we get to the fucking
Sorry.
game? Is that okay?
Frigga's tag. I love
Right.
saying that.
I had injections in my back on Monday, and they weren't just
Good.
injections. They it fucking hurt. They stuck probes in to burn the nerves away. So for the next, hopefully 1 to 2 years, I won't have as much pain. And because this was a procedure, I had those wristbands. Get you on multiple rides
Yes.
that they put on in the hospital that has your
Yeah.
name and details on. I had one of those on, and when I got home, I thought I'll remove it. It didn't go well. So, in which of the three following ways, did it not go well? A, did I waste 10 minutes trying to cut it off with blunt scissors rather than walk 15 steps and get the sharp scissors from Sam's office?
Sounds plausible.
Was it a
Are you
B?
saying yes, it was that one. Sorry, carry
Oh,
on.
me? No, I'm carrying
Yeah.
on with the.
Oh, okay.
Was it B that I actually cut my watch strap instead of the hospital band? They were on different wrists, by the way. But was it that I cut my watch strap instead of the hospital band, or was it toi that I tried pulling it really hard, ding, and fell off my chair?
Oh God, all three of those are very plausible.
They really are. Oh, that's really good. It's not blunt scissors because you use your massive pointy teeth, your big Dracula. I really like the addition of the watch was on a different wrist, and it's
I
too
know.
contrived. I liked it because if it isn't that, and I don't think it is, it means you cared enough to make up an extra bit, which is out of character for you to care about anything. So I don't think it's that. So I think you fell off your chair like a big loser.
Honestly, I wanted you to get that right. I feel so sorry for you.
Didn't I?
No, you didn't. I cut my watch strap.
Yeah, I was going to say, and you literally said the opposite. You were
Oh.
saying you don't care enough to make it up, so I'm not going to
Yeah,
go with
I
that
thought
one.
when you said
Your
that, I thought,
logic
oh,
was flawed.
I thought he's got one right. Fair play to him. Good,
You don't
good
care
on him,
enough to
'cause
make that up, so it's not
he's a-
that one.
I
He's a
thought, I
trier.
honestly, genuinely hoped just for once he'd had a moment of care.
No,
Of
no.
course not, because
Don't be
he's
No, of
ridiculous.
course
he's-
not. Yes, I'm a monster. Please write letters into jamesamonster@gmail.com.
Yeah,
That now makes it like 18, 17. We'll stop.
You
We'll stop
literally
keeping
cut your
score.
watch off, you fucking idiot.
No, I didn't cut it off. I just cut into the strap, so the strap is no longer usable.
On the other
Amazing.
wrist.
Yes, on the other wrist because I'm right-handed. Because I'm right-handed, and they put the thing on my right wrist, so I picked up the scissors and went.
Can I see the watch strap? It's
It's
brilliant.
not with me, but
Not
if I
gonna be
can
able to
find it, I might
find
put
it
it in
now,
the
is
drawer. Then we'll
Oh,
take a
God,
picture and
that's
put it on
br-
Insta.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Welcome to my fucking life. Anyway, on that slightly boring because Alex always loses note, we'll take a break and we'll come back to answer your questions in part 3. See you in a bit.
Bye.
No.
Yes.
Coming back in 1, 6, 7. Hello and welcome back to episode 167 of the ADHD Adults. In the third part of our third triple header
Vista.
On the causes of ADHD, this third part is about epigenetics. We're answering your questions. And as Sam rightly and accurately said, not your everybody's, just the people that we've got the questions of. I think probably unnecessarily. Right then, question number 1 from Daniela from Worcester. Hi, Daniela. Oh, no. I got
It's
all
all right.
distracted.
Carry on.
No, you go, Sam. Read it out for us. Go on. Who's
You
it
want
from?
me to read that one or the one from
Well,
Victoria?
just
Do you have a
explain
preference?
to the listeners. Just explain to the listeners. A mistake was made by, let's say, the most handsome of the 3
Passive
hosts
voice. I
in
like it.
in terms of who brings us back in, and then that was compounded by the
daddy.
fact that the first question would have been for the least attractive host to read out.
Hello.
And then in response to that, magnanimous Alex, I like it. In response to that, Alex very generously decided to move to the second question, but that says Sam, and now everyone's confused.
It is. I just tried to read it out. Go fuck yourself, San Diego.
What do you want me to read out, or are you going to read one out? What's
Do
happening?
your question, Sam. Do your question. Do it, man.
Okay,
Do
then.
it.
This is from Daniela from Worcester.
What's
It's
that,
not
sir?
far from us. Been listening to your podcast since I saw James in Cheltenham, and oh my goodness, it's seriously helped me to understand myself since diagnosis in November. My birthday's in November. Something for me that she didn't say that. My birthday. Something for me that I'm interested in is sensory issues. I'm a bare feet runner and I can't bear shoes, socks.
Oblique.
I hate wearing socks. And is there any research associated with this? Also, I struggle hugely with misophonia. Me too. And and sorry, I'm overexcited. And is constantly impacting my relationship and social issues. Is this usually common in ADHD or autism? Thank you for everything you're doing. Wow, there's so many things there.
Yeah.
I think we should just let you run with this for a bit, Sam.
Well, I really love being barefoot all the time because I hate the feeling of clothes and everything on me, but particularly socks. My feet are always black underfoot because I'm just running around everywhere, inside and outside.
Underfoot.
But I've never been barefoot running, but then I don't really do running. But I have looked at that you can buy the barefoot, like the shoes that are supposed to make you feel like you're barefoot. I'm interested to know whether they actually... Have you got some?
I would pay money to watch an autistic person put on one of those shoes which has a whole one for
Oh
each
no,
toe.
thanks.
the
Don't even
fingers.
talk
Oh,
about
God,
them.
yeah,
Don't even
oh.
talk about them. Don't even talk about them.
Putting your little toes in the little toe
No. But yes, I'm really interested in that. And also, yeah, it does impact your relationships when you have to wear noise cancelling headphones when your partner breathes or eats or exists. And yeah, that has a massive impact. But I don't know anything about the research. I would say that probably it's more common in autism, but lots of people with ADHD can have symptoms of autism. So it doesn't matter, does it? It's all part of the same tree. James, go.
What's going on?
What?
That's not it. You don't do a reasoned and scientifically relevant thing. You go, I just run over a frog and I'm sad. And
I would not run over a frog.
Not
No,
purpose.
but exactly. That's the kind of thing that I do.
Yeah,
No, but you nailed that, Sam. You nailed
I
it.
didn't really. I didn't talk about
No, you did-
research.
Well, but
accurate.
you don't even have to go into the research. Sensory processing issues are common in both and in combined because we can be hyper or hyposensitive to the various different 20 odd senses that we've got. And therefore, yes, it is more common to have Alex, for example. I remember when Alex first told me after he talked about ADHD that the reason, and for years I just thought, what a prick, the reason he wore sunglasses instead of his photophobia.
Yeah.
And I genuinely, for 2007 we met till you told was it 2015 you were diagnosed, something like that, was it? I just always thought, what a prick when you wore sunglasses.
I felt like a prick for wearing them.
I mean, I still think
I would wear them all the time, but I can never remember to bring them with me.
No,
but it physically hurts, and I
I get that. I get the same.
That's the thing.
Horrible.
And that's the thing. And if you look at the data, then light and sound are the two senses which are most commonly have processing issues within the neurodivergent community. So whether it is misophonia, whether it is, and the thing that fascinates me about you, Mrs. AuDHD, not just that you've got the senses of a wolf and that you can smell, see, hear things that human beings and even vampires can't.
Dracula's.
It's the thing, Dracula's. It's the thing, the way in which Sam explains it is that everything she hears is the same volume. And that fascinates me. So it's not that there are kind of loud things and quiet things. Everything's the same volume. And that's why sometimes a certain noise can be distressing because it's the same volume as
I was taking part
else.
in a study today in health psychology at work. And then near the end, they went, "How are you feeling?" And I went, "Oh, I'm so much better now that sound stopped." And they were like, "What sound?" I was like, there's been a deafening sound for the entirety of this. And there was a high-pitched sound throughout almost the whole thing. And then at the end, it stopped. And I was like, "Oh, thank God."
What,
but
did you think it was part of it? But somebody just left a fluorescent light on?
No, I knew it was something that I couldn't. But yes, yes, and that's why I struggle sometimes to hear. So when I go to poll, I often can't hear what my instructor's saying to me because there's music on in the background. It's not loud music, but I can hear it at the same volume as him.
Yeah.
So
choosing
it's
what
really
you pay
hard
attention to.
and just distinguish between them.
And what I'm finding, I mean, literally incredible, I can't quite work this out, is Sam can hear from even sometimes downstairs that the toilet system upstairs has water trickling into it because it's not been reset. But she can't hear when I turn up on the driveway with a car full of shopping that needs to be unloaded. At that point, her hearing seems to just kind of fade a little bit. Oh no, I don't know he's there.
Don't be ableist, James.
Yeah, the door opens and goes beep, 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 which again is a relatively loud thing, even though she hears everything at the same volume. And then I carry in those 6 to 8 bags of shopping with chronic back pain, a spondylolisthesis that was surgically fused in 1995. And you don't hear that, do you, Sam? That's
Have you noticed that it's not just sounds? We turn the radio off to do something complicated in the car, which really amuses me when I do that because it shouldn't make a difference. But
it does though, because it's any distraction, whether it's sound or anything.
I don't think that's just an ADHD thing. I'm not saying that. I just really like it. I bet it's more for us though.
Do you have anything to add to that, Alex, before you ask your question?
No, it was really good. I like the barefoot thing. I strongly suspect it's about reward as well. That it's an interesting thing to do. So
the feeling of stuff under your feet is lovely. So
it's a good challenge.
That's where I'm sensory seeking, because I love like the feeling of grass and sand underneath my feet. I'm not one of those people that doesn't. I can be really sensory seeking when it comes to touch.
And apart from with me.
Apart from with James.
Yeah, of course, obviously.
Anybody else? Fine.
I've got a question. Are you ready?
Yes.
No.
It's from Victoria. It says, does transcranial magnetic stimulation work for ADHD? Is it worth the money, especially if you can't take medication? Thank you. James.
It's a brilliant question. It is. And this is something that I was looking at the other day because one of my lovely clients, who I can't name because of client confidentiality, asked me about this. So I kind of looked it up and then saw this question, thought, oh God, that's from a different person and random but good timing. It's now actually an approved treatment for depression on the NHS. Because there are huge now meta-analyses of data when it comes to its impact, particularly on kind of treatment refractory or major depressive disorder that don't really work with the antidepressants because they're shit. With ADHD, there are some preliminary studies which suggest it can have an impact on symptoms, but we're at the pre-cum stage. We're not even fully ejaculating when it comes to this research. We are just wetting the tip of what we know about transcranial magnetic stimulation with ADHD. Sam,
what is it?
So do you remember when I had migraines and I bought that thing I stuck on my forehead, which was a little bit like a slender tone for your forehead? Yes. It's similar-ish to that, but rather than kind of electrically stimulating, it uses magnetic waves to stimulate the frontal parts of the brain. And this is theorized to then have an impact on their function. You look in pain.
Yeah, I don't like the thought of that.
Then don't think about it.
Okay.
Alex, any thoughts on this?
right now, I wouldn't tell someone to spend money on that because the evidence does not support it. That's it. That's all I would say. But it's, you know, you do what you want.
They're not. They're like either 400 or 600 quid or something. They're not cheap. They're not cheap, these units. I know exactly. So I think, and that's the key thing, is if you can wait for the evidence. And this is coming back to what we talked about in the last episode. For the people out there that are desperate for help, that have got adverts on it, and particularly if, like us, you've got ADHD, you follow people with ADHD on social media, that algorithm means that every third swipe you're going to see an advert for some fucking snake oil for ADHD, that if you're desperate and impulsive, you might spend money on. In this case, I think Alex is right.
Is
not
slightly harsh, but anything that tells me they're going to change me theta waves of my brain makes me really, really uncomfortable and nervous. You know, it's come on.
And just because something works for one person doesn't mean it will work for you. And antidepressants works for me. CBT worked for me. It doesn't work for most people. So everybody's different, aren't they? So it's impossible. Even if there was evidence behind it, we couldn't say, yes, go and do that, because everyone's different.
You've wonderfully explained the intervention response curve there, Sam. That there is no single intervention in medicine that works for everybody, and that you'll always have responders, non-responders, and adverse responders. So you're absolutely right. For some people, it might make things get worse: skin irritation, headaches. Anyway, podcast dad is going to take us home. So, final question from Sam, not our Sam, as you'll realise when you hear the question. I know that impulsive spending can be part of ADHD, but could the opposite be part of ADHD? Hoarding money because you're afraid to waste it and can't plan finances, he says, looking at Alex. Have either of you two got an opinion on whether or not the opposite of impulse spending could be a manifestation?
I would imagine with our risk perception that it could be.
She's ruining this.
I'm sorry.
She isn't. She's getting too
meaningful and well thought out answers. You're supposed to go, oh no, me pole.
Is this like you being jealous of your brother for having worse ADHD than you? You do all the psychoeducation, but if I say one thing that's slightly off,
what are you doing?
This should be me. I'm the only one that says things.
It's like Ronnie Corbett telling an actual joke on the two Ronnies. Ronnie Barker would have beaten the shit out of him afterwards.
You would, yeah.
Your job is to not be funny.
Anyway, Alex, go.
Yes, Alex,
go.
Go.
Can I? Because you've said it.
No, I haven't.
I think that's exactly it.
Right, I'm so sorry.
We don't do risk well. It doesn't always have to be taking risks. And you, whatever she said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That's the funniest thing you've ever done.
You're silly. What about you, James? What do you think?
It fascinates me, and yeah, Sam was right, and this is again one of the many frustrating things about being part of our community. No, not that. That's very frustrating. You're very frustrating in general. One of the frustrating things is this idea that ADHD is that a simple explanation for a complex phenomena, syndrome, disorder, condition, whatever you want to call it, is almost always going to be wrong. And therefore you will see people describe us as I think I mentioned this in the last episode, dopamine addicts. You'll see us seen as, risk takers. Yeah, that exactly. You'll see us that we're always seeking out that dopamine, etc. And it's just not the fucking case. And if we sometimes do seek behaviors that give us dopamine, sometimes it's because it makes things quieter and stops that screaming that makes us want to drink a liter of vodka. I couldn't even drink a glass of it because I'd be sick.
Oh, I could.
And I think that this is a manifestation of that. Absolutely. Yes, it's probably not based on any science, more common that people impulse spend rather than protect and hoard their money. But it does come down to the fact that risk perception and analysis is an executive function, and ADHD is an executive function disorder.
And the fear of it. I think it's what they've written, what Sam's written, not Sam. It can't plan, so don't know what to do. The number of times James said to me, It's 20 quid, Alex. It will save you like hundreds later on. I'm like, I don't know. When I get all confused.
Do you know, I get that because weirdly, because I don't have any money, I'm in loads of debt and I'm great at spending money on credit cards. But if ever I am given a little bit of money,
Yeah.
I can't spend that. I have to spend ages thinking about a decision of how am I going to spend this money? And yet I'm in loads of debt. I could actually just pay it off my debt, but that would be a waste.
No, it wouldn't. It's absolutely the right thing to do. It's always the right thing to do.
It is. Okay. It's time to go, I think.
Okay.
And I'm sure the listeners agree. That was episode 167. Thank fuck, the final of our triple fister of the causes and influencing factors of ADHD, where we talked about epigenetics and other stuff as well. In scriptures, where we talked about the role that epigenetics may play in the development of ADHD.
Yeah,
so good they named it twice. Yeah, if you're still listening, not sure why, but probably because you like Mrs. AuDHD's monologue after the end music, you can get in touch via the website at www.theadhdadults.uk. You can send us letters, you can send us questions, and you can send me abuse like lots of people do.
Yeah,
bye-bye.
Please do that last one.
Bye.
Bye all.
Trigger warning, klaxon. Klaxon, 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 big klaxon. No. Trigger warning, klaxon. Klaxon, klaxon.
So, James's favourite band is Suede. I didn't leave a long enough gap, did I? It doesn't matter.
No.
Anyway, I decided I'd always wanted to go to Margate. I couldn't remember why, and it turns out I don't think I'd always wanted to go to Margate. But anyway, I booked for us to go to Margate to see Suede in Dreamland, and I always wanted to go to Dreamland, except I probably didn't. But anyway, we drove 6 hours to get there, and actually, I hadn't just bought tickets to see Suede in Margate. I'd also bought tickets to see Suede in Manchester, and I thought that but it doesn't matter. I'd bought both of them. I thought I'd done one instead of the other, but I hadn't. I'd bought both. We didn't go to either of them, by the way. In the end, we drove 6 hours to get to Margate, got there, got into the gig. I was really enjoying it. I was like visually stimming, looking at all the things, listening to people, and I was really loving it. And then all of a sudden, more and more people were coming in, more and more people were coming in, and I got really, really overwhelmed, and we had to leave before they even started the gig. So I booked tickets to see Suede in Manchester and Margate, and we didn't go to either of them, and we drove 6 hours there, 6 hours back. It was fucking boiling, and yeah, it was just everything that I do. And actually, I told my pole teacher, and he went, "Why do you keep booking tickets to see Suede? Every time you do that, you fuck it up for James. Just let him go on his own."